evening, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop Vanessa M. Brown, and I'm your host and moderator for this evening. We are very, very, very happy to have you here online with us. We greet everyone who is on here from Facebook, both on Beyond the Gatekeepers page and Bishop Flunder's page. Those who are here from also the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries page. We greet you all. We greet you all that are on YouTube and on Instagram and on X and on LinkedIn. We say hello to everyone. We are grateful for your presence, and we ask everyone that is coming into the room if you would do us a big favor and share this conversation. I promise that it's going to be a very, very, very enlightening conversation, an inspiring conversation, and we are excited about the author who is here with us tonight. Let me bring Bishop Flunder on right now. Hi, Bishop Flunder is our presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. She is the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ. And so we are so excited that she is here once again with us on this evening. Bishop Flunder, will you greet our guest?
Well, welcome everyone. It's really a wonderful time to be in conversation, isn't it? About so many, many things that are
So
going
many
on.
things.
And also to raise our voices and our consciousness and really believe that in the end, good will out. Good will be in so many ways, much more powerful than evil.
Yes.
And sometimes that means we have to change the way we talk, change the what we read, who we are in conversation with. And we are in conversation today with a beloved sister who we have known for a number of years. I've seen her do some dangerous work out
Yes.
there. Amen. Not only in rabbinical circles, but also speaking truth to power as it relates to organizations and people who have serious differences and ideas, and many people who are now being torn apart and in so many ways divisively, because folks are trying to get their evil plans made essentially spread across the country and world.
It's funny that you said that, Bishop Flunder. Before we talk about the author tonight, I'm going to give out shout outs. But before we do that, it's funny that you just mentioned the evil plans, the divisiveness. I shared a couple of things, and one of them is how the Million Moms are outraged with Hilton hotels because Paris Hilton has done a commercial and everybody is in pink. Even the men, the women, everybody, kids, and they say she's promoting the gay agenda. And every time I read that, I keep saying, well, what is exactly the gay agenda? Because nobody ever told me. Like, I missed it. Like, I don't know what the gay agenda is. Like, I'm not really understanding. So they're actually like really, really going crazy over this this whole ad that she has, which I think is quite wonderful. She is heir to the Hilton brand, and she does things her way.
And so Pink doesn't deserve this.
And Pink,
Pink
it really is being beat up. Okay.
And it's just so dumb stupid in so many interesting ways. It's kind of like Donald Trump walking around with the Bible, you know.
Yeah, it's like I'm just like not getting it.
They want to give him ordination, you know. It's an interesting concept.
I don't understand it.
But it will only last, as the old folks say, trouble don't last always.
Yeah.
It will burn itself out as long as we are clear.
Yeah.
That justice also needs advocates.
Yes.
And that what we do is the kind of conversation that we're going to have today. So I so look forward to it.
Yeah. So I want to shout out Chuck Hunt from Monroe, Louisiana tonight. Albert Reed is here from Colleen, Texas. Lavinia Bean from Cape May. Sean Jenkins from Metro Atlanta. They're all on Facebook. Cheryl Robinson Moore is on YouTube. Pastor C. from St. Louis. Pastor Siegfried Benton is Temple Hills, Maryland. Reginald Nichols, Stockton, California. Kelly Shepard is with us from Detroit, Michigan. Sherry Dampier from also, I don't know where Sherry is from. I'm sorry, she didn't put it. Ryan Harris, Deacon Ryan Harris from Cincinnati. Okay, Brooklyn, Bedford Stuyvesant in the house. Sherry is from Bedford Stuyvesant. Maria Harris, Denver, Colorado. Tim Bray from the DMV. Welcome. They're all on YouTube. Dinah Chapman is from Dublin, California. I see you all in here. Minister David here from the New York, New Jersey area. Pastor Eunice here from Long Island. Natasha Robinson, Professor Natasha Robinson from Chicago, Illinois. Reverend Tracy Ruffin from League City, Texas. Jan Ain from Brooklyn. Beverly Scott Hudson from Reverend Beverly Scott Hudson from Philadelphia, PA. And the people are just coming on one by one. Apostle Donaldson is on Instagram. Welcome. Dr. Jamie Edie is here checking in from Philly. Diane Rodriguez is here from Portland, Oregon. They are just coming in, and we are excited because we have a wonderful guest here with us on this evening. And you and Rabbi go way back. Yes. And so we are excited to have Rabbi Sharon Brous here. She's the founder and senior rabbi of ICAR. And we are very, very happy. But more than that, I don't want to say more than that, but also, and in addition to, Rabbi Sharon is the author of this fabulous, wonderful book that is making its way around the world, internationally as well, called The Amen Effect, Ancient Wisdom to Mend Our Broken Hearts and World. And again, you know what we're going to do. We're going to be giving away this book tonight, but we're also going to be encouraging you to purchase the book. I have the book. I had the opportunity to read it. It's a wonderful book. I am recommending it. You know, if you want to win it, you're going to put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers so you can win the whole word, hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers so you can win the book. But if you're going to buy it, you're going to go to Rabbi Sharon's, to ICAR's website, and you're going to go www.icar.org/order-the-amen-effect. We're going to put that all in the chat so you don't have to remember it. In every place it's going to be there. It's already being put in there. Thank you so much, Pastor Sue, for making that happen for us. And anywhere else books are sold, you can also make that purchase, because it's important that we do that for her. It's important that we do that for her. We're so glad to have you with us on tonight, Rabbi Sharon. Will you say hello to our audience?
Oh, bishops, I am so honored to have the opportunity to talk to both of you today, and Bishop Vanessa, to begin what I hope will be a long and beautiful friendship, and to see my friend Bishop Yvette Flunder. Last time we were together was back in North Carolina, celebrating Bishop Barber, and it's just it's a joy and an honor to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Really quickly, some people have just come in and want to shout out Lorna Blake. Thank you for being here. I don't like to miss the people. Sometimes I do because we're talking. But Althea Spencer Miller, is her first time here from Drew. And thank you so much for joining us for your first time. Reverend Dr. Amina Butts is with us from the DMV area. Thank you all for joining us for the first time. Terry L. Elliott, thank you. And make sure you share with someone so it can be their first time too. So, Rabbi, I have questions for you about this book. Let me just tell you, for me, it's been a blessing. And I am grateful that you were able to do this. And I do understand that during the pandemic is when you kind of started pulling this together. And so, Bishop Flunder, when we started back in May of 2020, we had so many people who are writing books in the COVID, right? And came out with stuff that was so profound and so wonderful, right? And so you happen to be one of those persons. And I want to ask you this: what inspired you to translate your sermons into a book for the wider public?
Thank you for that question. So first, the book is rooted. it really has its origin in one particular sermon that I gave about 11 years ago on Kol Nidre, which is the holiest night of the year for Jews. And it was a sermon that I gave because I realized that 10 years into building our community in Los Angeles, we really had dedicated ourselves to standing at the intersection of revitalizing Jewish practice and, making prayer services that would be deeply moving and compelling, and where people could cry and dance and sing together. And the work of social justice and social change, we really wanted to do everything we could to build a more just and loving society. So we were sort of standing in the intersection of spirituality and that justice work. And I realized after about a decade that we could not build the beloved community out in the world if we did not first build the beloved community internally, that there was no way to realize the dream of a just and loving society unless we did the hard work of investing in the building of a just and loving community and just and loving relationships. And that required that we would show up for each other in a totally different way than we had before. I'm talking about actually showing up in moments of sorrow and celebration and solidarity as a religious and spiritual obligation, not just as a nice thing that you do after work or after Shabbat services, or, but as the central responsibility of our religious practice. And the idea really was, if we could build oases of love and justice in this world, then we have a much better chance at actually building a world of love and justice. And so at that time, there had just started to be some literature that entered the kind of public space about what we now are calling an epidemic of loneliness and social disconnection. At the time, we weren't using the language of epidemic yet. But what I was seeing pastoring to a community was the way that loneliness and social alienation and isolation were just devastating our spirits. And what these scholars started writing about 15 years or so ago was the way that loneliness is not only hurting our mental and emotional wellness and our spiritual wellness, but is actually hurting our physical beings too. That we now know that acute loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of its impact on our bodies, that all kinds of early onset illnesses come from loneliness, etc. So there's a spiritual price, there's a physical price, and I'm a student of and was reading Hannah Arendt, the great 20th century philosopher. And Hannah Arendt warns that loneliness, social alienation, and isolation are preconditions for tyranny and for totalitarianism. That tyrannical regimes cannot get a foothold in a society when people know their neighbors, when people trust each other, when they are proximate to each other. And so I recognized that there was a spiritual crisis, a physical crisis, and a democracy crisis, that this epidemic of loneliness was threatening to destroy it all. And instead of responding with powerlessness, what we had to do is we had to respond by turning toward each other exactly at the moments that we're most inclined to pull away from each other. Turn toward each other with love, with curiosity, with compassion, and with care, and model what it means to actually build a kind of justice internally that we could ultimately, hopefully, manifest externally.
So in essence, the pandemic didn't just kill people physically, right?
That's right.
No,
That's right.
It was killing spirits, right? Our spirits. It was killing people emotionally, mentally,
Yes,
and physically as well. So it was really, really doing a job, and I could see that as you wrote it down in the book, but even as you spoke it on tonight, I can see what it was doing. I could see that it destroyed relationships. And I mean, whether it was intimate relationships, friendships, whatever, it destroyed every ship it could during that time.
That's absolutely right. And I remember one particularly chilling conversation that I had with a young woman in her 30s. And she said, if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even notice?
Yeah.
Right? Like all of our points of reference were broken. But I have to say that this predated the pandemic, and there was a study that came out before 2020, before the pandemic began that said that 1 in 3 Americans do not know the names of their next door neighbors.
Wow.
They don't know the names of the person who lives to the right or the left. That more than 20% of Americans say they don't have one single confidant. There's nobody in the world who they trust, who they would share their pain, their grief, their agony, their moral confusion. And when that is the nature of a society, and again, those are pre-COVID statistics, obviously things got worse with the pandemic because we were forced to isolate and we had to work even harder to maintain connection. That seems like it's building a kind of momentum toward a spiritual, physical, and social crisis that we're absolutely seeing right now. I mean, the whole idea of conspiracy theories. What kind of community and society can conspiracy theories thrive in? One in which people don't know each other.
Right.
In which they don't speak to people outside of their smallest tribes, their inner concentric circles. So then they hear things about people and they start to think, oh, maybe that could be right, because they don't have any personal experience that will teach them otherwise. And so part of the challenge of the book is what happens when we're able to see each other's humanity in pain and in joy. And what happens when, instead of looking away, when we want to look away, because it's very hard to see somebody else's vulnerability, instead, if we lean into their vulnerability and meet vulnerability to vulnerability and sorrow to sorrow.
Rabbi, did the study that you spoke about, did it say how that happened? Because that's very different on how in ways in which I grew up. I grew up and I knew everybody in my building. I grew up in a building that was 17 floors. I knew everybody in that building, and everybody knew me as Nessa. They knew me. They knew that I was the Browns kid, right? I knew their names. I knew all the children that lived on the E line. And so that's very different. I mean, even in the community, even when bad things were happening, I knew even all of the things when people were selling drugs, I knew those guys. I knew them by name, but they also knew me, right? The police officers knew who I was. All the children, not just me. Like, they knew who we belonged to, who our parents were. Like, does it say anything about what happened that moved us from that place to where we probably still are now?
That study doesn't point to an answer to the question of why, but I can guess what happened. I mean, I think there are a couple of factors. One is suburbanization, people, trying to get out of more densely populated area to get more privacy, more private space. One of my beloved rabbi actually moved down to Costa Rica, and he moved into an ecovia where nobody's allowed to put a basketball hoop on their own property. Nobody's allowed to put a swimming pool or a hot tub or anything, because they have one for the whole community and they want everyone to share. And that's the ethos of the community. But this isn't the way that things work in a lot of suburban communities now. Everyone has their own everything. So we limit the needs to depend on other people. And so I think that's part of the myth of radical individualism that's so dominant in our society today, where we forget that we actually are fundamentally, biologically, psychologically, and spiritually, we are relational beings. We actually need each other. But instead, we live this myth as if we can do this on our own. And do you remember years ago when President Obama took so much heat because he said something about the small business people, and he said, like, you didn't build that on your own, because there were people who built the roads and there were people who drove the trucks, and so many people freaked out about that, as if he was taking something away from them by saying you didn't build that. But what he was saying was, we are part of this network of humanity. We are all bound up in one another. That doesn't take something away from you. That actually brings you into community with so many people who made it possible for you to have the life that you have. And so I think that we're oriented away from each other. I think that technology has contributed to this in very dangerous ways. We see, I mean, this podcast started during COVID when we needed technology in order to stay alive, right?
Yeah,
this was our mechanism for reaching each other. But we also know that these same technologies have driven people to the edge and over. I mean, you see families out to dinner and every single person's on their own phone. They can't even look at each other, let alone have a conversation with each other. We know that in loneliness studies over the last 2 decades, 2012 is a tipping point year. 2012, that's when everything, all the numbers took a nosedive in terms of connectivity and relationships. And that 2012 was the year that social media became ubiquitous, that everybody was online, everybody was being platformed somewhere. And so what happened was that as that rose, our actual relationships took a hit. And so I think there are all kinds of social reasons that we can point to, but the main issue, and the really truly urgent issue, is that if we don't figure out a way to see each other's humanity, to move back into relationship, to deepen our sense of connection and attachment to one another, to find our way to each other with compassion and curiosity, not only will we break as individuals, but our society is being torn apart. And we're not helpless here. We're not just watching from the sidelines saying, oh my God, like when we talk about the climate catastrophe and people just feel like, with these, there's something like 3 or 4 major multinational corporations that are responsible for most of the bad emissions in the world. And we feel like, what could I possibly do to make a difference when there are a couple of bad actors that are spoiling everything? But here, that kind of powerlessness is the opposite of what I want to communicate here. There is a crisis. It is very dangerous, but we can absolutely act, and we can act in very sort of deceptively small ways in order to change, to kind of reorient ourselves toward living in community in different ways that can have a transformative, reverberative impact on our broader communities and on our broader society.
Thank you, Rabbi Sharon. Bishop Flunder, I know you have a lot to say.
I write notes to myself several things that came to my mind, but I think the things I most want to share, maybe a couple of notes to me. I said we need to have less other and more same. Mm-hmm. And when I say less other, I mean there is a tendency for us to gather with the people that we feel comfortable with, that we're around, that we have a connection with. And it makes it very difficult to find other connecting points with people who are different and perhaps see things differently, or have a different religion, or a different concept, a different political position, a different race, all of those things. The difficulty of finding some sameness among us. Mm-hmm. What are the things that we as people can connect to? A sameness. We're all in the same country. There's that. We all perhaps have children in and around our community. There's that. We all have some understanding of the divine, though it may be different understandings of the divine. There's that. Those things are very difficult. I'll go back to your point, Bishop Vanessa. When you were in the neighborhood, there was a sameness that connected you to the people who were in the neighborhood that had that sameness. There were also people in the neighborhood, or just close to the neighborhood, who did not have a sameness with those of you that were there. Perhaps a group of people who were Jewish, or a group of people who were Native American or European in some way. And you could walk right past them on the way to your people. And they could walk right past you. And you wouldn't even, to some degree, realize that they had passed you, because you were on your way to the people and the things that you were connected to. Let's just put it that way. It takes a lot to reach outside of our comfort zones, whatever those comfort zones may be. And sometimes I use the scenario of chitlins. You've heard me talk about chitlins. Chitlins, as versus say all of the food that is on the table, Rabbi Sharon, for a feast for your community. It's very different than the food that's on the table, oftentimes for what have been a Black family. That, and I like to say chitlins, because chitlins, and I'll say it again, chitlins is something that you just don't come into late in life. You kind of have to grow up on chitlins. You have to be raised on chitlins, and they're not just pork. That's part of the situation, but they're pork entrails, for heaven's sake. And it was the food of the poor, the food that was all that we could get. It was what was left over by massa, by the slaveholder. We got pigtails, pig ears, pig heads. They kept pig. What else, Mom? Hog head. Yeah, that's what they called it. A cheese that was created, hog head cheese, and it was the food of the leftover. And it became a delicacy almost in our communities for that reason. I doubt seriously if I would be able to start late in life moving into chitlins. You kind of have to come up on chitlins. I use it as a way of saying that there are realities that make us uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because we are racially, in some ways, community different from one another. And religion is the great divider of in so many ways, who's best, who knows the divine the most. Where do we find, and you're so right, we have got to find the common denominators that will allow us to do two very dangerous things. And I like your book. One is to find that we are not superior, that we are all human in some way. That business of superiority is painful. It's not just racism. It is definitely religionism. There's no question about that. And then how do we also find, and I find our conversation with you powerful about this, and it has to be real. It has to be not me doing you a favor, doing me a favor, but in some way, authentically finding that one of us is not greater. Different does not mean less than or greater than. But then enclosed in that, what are the things, and I would love to hear your heart, what are the things that we do have the potential to have in common? I know it's in the book, but I want you to share it with our folks, that we do have in common, that is not pretense, real, authentic connection that we can have with one another. When my Jewish friends are having their supper and I'm having mine, we may not be able, we may not, chitlins don't smell good when they're cooking either, I have to tell you. They just really don't. But what are the things that we can do together that are authentic? So I would love to be able to share that even more.
Okay, so chitlins. I have many things to say in response to this. The first is that first let me just say that sometimes we speak about the Black community and the Jewish community as if they're totally separate entities, and they're not. There are many Black Jews also, and there are many. In fact, there was a study that a Black Jew did about 10 years ago out here in Northern California that studied that across the United States, Jews of color are 12 to 20% of the Jewish population. So there is this perception that the American Jewish community is a white community, and it's really not. And ours is a multiracial community, and that's true. So I just want to share that first of all. So I think there are a lot of Jews who've grown up with similar traditions to what you're describing, because they're also Black. They're, that's part of their history. They're holding this, but they're holding this dual heritage. So what we know about human beings is that human beings need tribes, that it's actually very positive to build relationships with the community, that can help you navigate life. I mean, in ancient times, and even before the ancient world that I'm discussing here, and I hope I'll get a chance. I want to share with you the ritual that really sits at the heart of the book. But long, long ago, without tribes in the wilderness, nobody could survive. So we need each other for survival, physical and emotional survival. Not everyone can do everything. It's really good and positive for us to be in communities where different people can take on different roles, and those people become our tribe, and that's wonderful and important. We tend to build tribes around people who look like us and or talk like us, pray like us, or vote like us. I mean, that's just the reality of how most tribes are formed. And what I found most interesting about the scholarship on tribes is that the depth of our relationship and our sense of connection to our tribes inversely correlates to the amount of indifference or even hostility that we feel toward people outside our tribes. So the more connected I am to my, let's say, Milburn High School community, if that's really my tribe, the more apathetic, indifferent, or even hostile I'll feel toward the Chatham High School community. But if I don't feel so connected to Milburn, then I could build relationships in Chatham, or I could build relationships in East Orange or in West Orange. Like, people are just, high school students might be my tribe. But the deeper my connection to high school students, the more antipathy I might feel toward middle school students. So whatever we define as our tribe, we take all of the comfort and consolation and beauty that comes from that. But we have to be very careful not to then turn to the people outside our tribe with hostility, with antipathy, or with indifference. So that, I think, is a really important first step, to just note that that's what happens, that it's okay, that I take great comfort in seeing my people who show up on Shabbat morning, on Saturday morning, and come into shul, and I feel like, oh, my people, my tribe, I want them close to me. These are the people that we walk through life with. We laugh together, we cry together, we dance together. That's really good. But I have to make sure that my love of that community does not then lead me to feel disconnected from everybody outside that community. In the Mishnah, which is this very ancient compendium of Jewish law that actually I drew the main ritual of my book from, there's another ancient text that I just want to draw us to for a moment, because I think it answers some of what you're describing here. The rabbis are, it was written 2,000 years ago. This was codified in the year 220 CE. So this is a very old text, and they're talking about how we prepare witnesses who are about to testify in a capital case. And they said that the judges would sit down with the witnesses before they go forward to give their testimony. And they would say to them, listen to me, you're about to testify, and a person's life is on the line based on your testimony. So know this, when God created the world, God started with just one person, that first Adam, just one person, not with 10 or 100 or 1,000,000 people, just one. And there's a reason why. The reason God started with only one is to teach us that if you destroy a single life, it's as if you've destroyed an entire world. And if you save a single life, it's as if you've saved an entire world. And this teaching, by the way, appears both in the Mishnah. It then appears in the Quran. This is an idea that's kind of echoed in a lot of theological literature from different traditions. If you save a single life, it's as if you've saved a whole world, because in the language of one of my teachers, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, every single human being has infinite worth, inestimable worth. The second thing we learn is that it is fundamentally impossible to say that one person or one people is superior to another person or another people. There's no such thing as superior, because we all come from the same ancestor and from the same God. And so this is the fundamental incompatibility of religion and racism. You can't really be religious and be a racist. It doesn't work, right? Because we are all fundamentally created in God's own image, and we're all descendants of Adam Harishon, Adam, the first person. We are all fundamentally equal. And the third teaching that they say to these witnesses who are about to go testify is they say, never forget that when we go in the treasury, when you stamp out a coin, there's one mold and every coin looks exactly the same. But when God stamps out humanity from one mold of Adam, the first person, every one of us is different. And so every single person has this third dignity, the dignity of uniqueness, that every single one of us was put into the world with a particular mission that only we can fulfill. And so if you take someone else's life and degrade it, or suppress it, or contain it, or incarcerate it, or whatever you do to stop someone else from reaching their full potential, you're actually stopping God from reaching God's full potential. And then you wonder, like, could anyone have testified after that? Because you have no idea, like, what this person's life could have been. And so I think in response to your question, I want to say that part of what we're called to do as, as people of faith, is to actually look at every human being we encounter as an image of God, and to say this person is infinitely worthy. This person is no better and no worse than me, and is absolutely as worthy of love and life and dignity as I believe I am. And this person's unique in the world and deserves to live a life of thriving, where her voice, her vision can actually be received with great love. And what changes in our hearts and in our policies and in our universities and in our our legislative halls when we actually take that idea seriously? Everything changes. Everything. Like you can't walk to work the same way that you did before if every person on the street is seen as an image of God, someone's child, right? We're as worthy of love as you and I are. And so the idea is to put this mindset at the forefront as we engage the world and as we look to one another, so that the very least we can do is hold a basic kind of humility when we encounter each other, and compassion toward each other, and curiosity about each other, even when things get rough and when it's very hard to do.
That's beautiful, Rabbi Sharon. And you moved me to my next question, which I think you already answered. You answered it before I asked, which is simply going to be, how do you think your book fits into the current moment? Right? Both Jewishly, but also on a universal scale. And when I talk about the universal scale, I mean, as it relates to what's happening with Palestinians and Israelis. And I think that you answered a lot of that, right? To see each other more humanly, but you can say more.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, I'll tell you that I closed the manuscript for this book long before October 7th. I closed it about almost a year and a half ago now. And so, I'm going to share with you the central image of the book, because it will help explain my answer to this question. There's a fairly obscure ancient ritual that has really been my North Star for the last 20 years, since I became a rabbi. And the ritual describes when, in the ancient world, hundreds of thousands of Jews used to go up to Jerusalem on the holiest days of the year. They would come from all across the land and the diaspora. They would ascend to Jerusalem, which is a city on a hill, of course. They would climb the steps of the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. And then they would enter through this beautiful arched entryway. And they would turn to the right, and they would circle around the perimeter of the courtyard of the Temple Mount, the holiest place on the holiest days in the holiest city. Masses of people moving together in body and spirit, except the text says for someone who's brokenhearted. A brokenhearted person would go up to Jerusalem, would go up the steps, would walk through the same entryway, but would turn to the left when everyone else turns to the right. And there would be a sacred encounter that would happen between the person who's coming from one direction and all the people who are coming from the other. And the person who's brokenhearted would be greeted by the people walking in the direction of the masses. They would look into this person's eyes, and they would ask them very simply a question. In Hebrew, the words are malach. Tell me what happened to you. Tell me about your broken heart. Tell me what you see from your vantage point. And this person, the bereaved and the bereft and the ill and the lonely, would say, my heart's broken because my loved one just died, and he was sick for 3 years, and we did the best we could to take care of him. But I just feel so sad and so lost. Or I just need someone to tell me that my kid's going to be okay. I'm so worried about her. Or I just don't feel like anyone in the world understands me, or my partner just left, or I found a lump, right? Whatever the thing is that they're holding with their broken hearts. And the people who are going this way, instead of running away from their pain and their vulnerability, would look into their eyes and offer them a blessing. Not the priests, not the rabbis, just the people who were there to celebrate. And they would offer them a blessing, something like, may the one who dwells in this place hold you with love as you navigate this chapter of darkness in your life, or even as you go through treatment in the months ahead. May you know that you're surrounded by love. And that's it. That's the whole ritual. They would go to this place and have this encounter, and then they'd leave and go have dinner. So what I realized, and why I love this ritual so much, is that it's totally counterinstinctual for every single party. The person who is bereaved and brokenhearted doesn't even want to get out of bed, let alone get dressed and show up in a place where the whole world is moving in one direction and they're moving in the other. And yet they're not allowed to stay in bed. They have to show up, and they're not allowed to go like everybody else and pretend they're okay, because they're not okay. They have to be vulnerable enough to share the truth of their broken heart and trust that they'll be held with love. And the people who are okay, and here I read a lot of testimonies from people who went on the Hajj and to Mecca, this like incredible, sensational experience of just millions of people moving together. The people who are going to the right are having the peak spiritual experience of their lives. The last thing they want to do is like peel away from their friends and loved ones and go check on a stranger with puffy red eyes coming toward them. And yet that's exactly what they're there to do. And I realized that what the ancients are saying to us is it's precisely when our instinct is to retreat that we turn toward each other. And how do we turn toward each other? With compassion and with curiosity. We ask a question. Tell me what's in your heart. We see that somebody's full of sorrow. And we don't try to diminish their sorrow or sidestep their sorrow or ignore their sorrow. We don't try to tell them that our sorrow is worse than their sorrow. We ask them, tell me about your broken heart. And in the course of the book, I explore all the different aspects of that incredible ritual. And then at the end of the book, I also share that it's not only the mourners, the brokenhearted, who turn to the left, but also the people who've been ostracized from the society, the people who have hurt others in word or in action, and they also walk in the other direction. And the hurt that they've caused is so serious that we don't invite them over, for dinner. Those people don't come into the church or don't come into the synagogue anymore. They're not allowed to. They don't come over for chitlins. They are not a part of our community anymore, but they show up on those days, and we see them in their humanity. And we don't run away from them. We ask them, tell me about your pain. And they answer, and we bless them. And so the reason I'm explaining all of this is because I feel in some ways, while I wrote this book for another world, I wrote it in another world, but I wrote it for this moment. I wrote it for this moment that we're living in right now, where we are more fractured, more ruptured, more torn apart and broken than I think we've ever been. And I'm frankly deeply concerned, because it's not just a general kind of social rift. It's precisely the democracy coalition. It's the people who care about justice. It's the people who are fighting climate change, and the people who are fighting for racial justice and economic justice and reproductive rights, and people who are fighting for LGBTQ liberation. Those are the people who don't even want to be in the room with each other anymore right now. Like, we are torn up. We are all torn up, and I'm worried about it. And this ritual is this circling is in my head and in my eyes all day long now. And I see that what it's saying is, we don't want to see each other right now, but we don't have a choice. And so we show up and we look into each other's eyes, and we ask a question. Tell me, what does it look like from your side? And when we ask that question, it makes us very vulnerable too, because we're forced to consider that someone else is fully human, which is really hard because we want to live in a world of black and white and binary thinking. But that's saying, actually, there are human beings who are suffering right now, who are in great pain. And I believe that one of the ways that we can meet each other is in that heartache and in that pain. And if we allow ourselves to see that someone's brokenhearted, and we allow ourselves to show that we are also brokenhearted, then we can grieve together. And that's the beginning of the movement toward healing. That as I said, that was my North Star long before October 7th and this terrible war and day after day of just horrific, stunning human suffering. I mean, it's like too much to bear, even from afar. And even still, every day I feel it calling to me saying, don't walk away from each other. Move toward each other, get proximate with each other, talk to one another with an open heart, share your brokenheartedness, and be willing to receive someone else's brokenheartedness and dare to see their humanity too. And I believe that is the only path toward healing for us today.
I'm going to let Bishop Flunder go, but I just want to say thank you for saying it out loud. It is painful to watch. It is painful to see. It's even from afar. It's painful to see children in the street crying, hungry, destitute, no clothes, no food, people drowning in water just to go get food that was dropped. It's just all painful. So thank you for saying that, because it is painful and we have to say that. And it doesn't make us weak to feel that, to
That's right.
see it, to have compassion for it. So thank you for that. Bishop Flunder.
Thank you, sister. That was a lot. And the thing that kind of comes up for me at times when I think about, because I support the idea and the concept and the beauty that could come from that kind of interaction. I think about that the interaction itself that we seek so much to have when we are seeking peace is itself given to people who are privileged to some degree, because they are enabled. When you're going to the event, it suggests that you are able to go to the event. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
But you have transportation, or someone won't shoot you at the door, or something like that. When I weigh that against what also Bishop Vanessa is saying, the deep sadness that I have is when I look in the eyes of the conversations between President Biden and Netanyahu. When I look at their eyes and the effort to make a decision about when will the ceasefire happen, when will it come to an end, in the back of my mind are the pictures of these children who are in parts and pieces on the ground, and crying out in what is incredible pain. Not just the loss of parents or the absence of food, but the pain. They have never known pain like that, and never had a foot shot off. They don't know what that is. And when I juxtapose that to these two men who are having this conversation, if you understand what I'm saying, and basically one is saying that we need to find a way to bring an end to it. The other one is saying we're not going to bring an end to it until we have taken all of these people's lives and relocated them. Either they'll be going as bodies, or they're going dead bodies, or they're going as humans, but they've got to go away from. None of those, most of those who are suffering had nothing to do with what happened that created the problem. And I guess that in my heart, I can see peace happening among people who are privileged. I can see peace happening among people who have the ability, like we're having right now, to sit down and talk. But we are not the people who are doing this incredible suffering. And I'm glad to say that it's not happening to me. And that's also my testimony. I am glad to say that someone is not setting me on fire. I'm glad to say that people are not currently bombing my home. I'm glad to say that my children have not been killed. I'm happy that that has not happened to my children, but then I also in some ways feel that I cannot even say that I am happy that those realities have not come to me, because it sounds like I am not broken and sad enough for those that these things have happened to. So yes, I know that there needs to be some dialogue. There needs to be some, but I am very curious when we all talk about this. What is it what is the do? What are the things that we can do? Certainly we can seek peace in the communities that we are connected to, and that's important and powerful to keep perhaps some of these realities from happening again in the future. But how do we put that over against? What is the action? What is the active thing that we can do about these babies, about these women, about these people and men who are part of communities that did not have any say so before this wave? I think of it the way I do about slavery for my ancestors, where a group of African people go into the bush of Africa, one tribe and another tribe, one who is in relationship with slaveholders, and the other, which basically doesn't even know what the slavery actually is, essentially, for their community. And a group of Black people go into the interior and bring another tribe or people from another tribe with whom they have some difficulty but feel superior to them, and sell them for guns. And they are taken in ships to other places abroad from their homeland. How do we address something like that? How do we, I have that blood in me. How do we address that in our effort to speak to it? When we're outside of the potential for ritual? And I think you may understand that ritual, because I'm involved in them all the time, is a type of privilege. To be able to have worship, Bishop Vanessa, and to be able to talk through on the gatekeepers, the kinds of things that we're talking about right now, suggests that we have a degree of safety, that nobody is coming for my head, at least tonight. Hallelujah. Praise God. I'm glad about that. But our truth is we can say it from a place of privilege. If that, and I hope you hear my heart. I am trying to understand, as we are, what are the ways, the methods? How do we speak into the people who have the power to continue to hurt other people and truly, honestly look the other way, as though it's necessary and it really doesn't matter? And please forgive me, Bishop Vanessa, but I wanted to lay one other thing out here with us tonight, because I'm thinking that what has just happened in Russia in terms of the bombing of their community center that was bombed, and the intention of making it Ukraine, and saying over and over again that they really do believe that somebody from Ukraine did this, which of course will justify whatever bombardment is going to be. Sisters, beloved, those of you that are listening to us tonight, because this woman has touched on some things that are incredibly important. What are we going to do? We who say peace. What is it that we're going to do to stop these incredible losses of life and safety that are happening all over the world by maybe, Bishop Vanessa, 5 or 6 guys who are making these? Can I say that again? We have a Trump. They have a Putin, a Netanyahu. What? How do they get the power to do the kinds of things that are happening all over our world. And how can we speak into this, sister? How can we speak into this, Rabbi Sharon? How can we speak life in this time of death?
Well, before Rabbi Sharon says anything, Rabbi Sharon, you need to get your people to send Netanyahu and Putin and all. They need to read your book. That's the first things first. They need to read this book to get their minds right.
Amen.
And center themselves so they can get the amen effect in them
tonight,
because they don't have it. So go ahead.
Well, I really thank you for sharing that. You said a lot, and every time I hear you speak, I think we really need like days together to unpack all of these pieces. And I want to make sure that I really fully understand everything that you're saying too. And so I have many questions for you, but I will say this briefly. The other day, my husband made me a beautiful breakfast, and he's a great cook, and he's so thoughtful, and I can't cook, so it makes it really convenient in our house that he can. And I just sat down to eat this beautiful breakfast, and I had two thoughts simultaneously. One was about Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who is a young American Israeli kid who's my daughter's age, who went to a peace dance party on the night of October 6th and was abducted on October 7th after his arm was blown off by Hamas, and has been in captivity now for 172 days. And we don't know if he's alive or dead. But if he's alive, I know he's not eating a breakfast like the breakfast that I was eating that morning. And simultaneously, I thought about the children, about the hundreds of thousands of children, Palestinian children in Gaza, who are eating grass and animal feed to try to stay alive. And I just looked at my plate and thought, okay, I can't eat. Thank you for making this beautiful breakfast. Thank you, God, for the blessing of this food. But I'm sorry, I can't eat. And so you're right. It's a privilege to be able to talk about these things. It's a privilege to take the time to look in each other's eyes and see each other's humanity. And it's a privilege to eat, right? And so on some days we might be so sick over what's happening that we just can't eat. But we also need to eat to stay alive. And it doesn't help Hirsch, and it doesn't help the children of Gaza for me not to eat and for you not to eat. And so we keep eating and we engage in the privilege that we have. But with our privilege, we understand comes certain obligations. And I would offer two here right now. The first is the obligation not to look away. As painful as it is, I mean, I read the stories every single day. I read about the buildings that came down in the aerial bombardments in Gaza and entire families that were killed. I read the story this morning in the New York Times of a 30-year-old Israeli lawyer, this young woman who was abducted from Sderot and was raped in captivity by Hamas. I read all the stories. It's really hard. But I'm not going to look away because I think I have the privilege to just turn on the TV and watch comedy all the time. Like, I don't need to engage. I can get caught up in some drama that doesn't exist in the real world, but I'm not going to. I'm going to read the news, and I'm going to know what's happening, because there are human bodies and human spirits that are being broken right now. And I need to be a part of that human story. So the first thing is not to look away. And the second thing is that I believe that part of the privilege of being outside of an immediate war zone is that we choose which voices we want to platform and amplify and resource. And I can tell you right now that in a time of false binaries and half-truths, that I believe the most powerful thing that we can do is platform Israelis and Palestinians who are working together to build a just and shared future, to build a society, because they understand, and there are tens of thousands of these people who are working together in the streets every single day saying, like, you are my sister, you are my brother, you are my sibling. There are millions of people who live in this tiny sliver of land. None of us are going anywhere, no matter what Hamas wants and no matter what Ben Gvir wants. The most extreme, messianic, misogynistic, anti-LGBTQ voices, literally religious fanatics on this side and on this side, do not get to decide what our future looks like. We decide what our future looks like, and they're doing it together in partnership. They're standing together. Sally Abed and Alon Lee Green, who we just had at Ikar a couple weeks ago, and they've spent 2 weeks here in the United States just going around and talking to people. He's an Israeli Jew, descendant of Holocaust survivors. She's a Palestinian citizen of Israel. They're dear friends and true equal partners in the work. There's the Bereaved Families Forum, which are Israelis and Palestinians who've lost immediate family members to this conflict, who say, we have paid the ultimate price. And we can only do this together. The only future is a shared future. There's combatants for peace. There are musicians and artists in Lod, in Yafo, in all these towns throughout this land who are saying, we're going to make music together. We're going to make art together. We are going to build the kind of future we know is possible. And I believe that our work with this privilege is to let their voices be heard, to use my pulpit on Shabbat, your podcast, to have these voices of sanity and compassion and curiosity and care be the dominant voices. Because I'll tell you, what I hear on the main stage right now are only voices of extremists, because the algorithm plays to the extremes. And so our job is to counter the algorithm in some ways. I really don't want to hear from people who have such a binary sense. Either you support Hamas, you justify Hamas's atrocities, or you don't care about justice for Palestinians. What are you talking about? Right? I've been fighting for decades for a just future for Palestinians. And I can call what happened on October 7th what it was, which were atrocities, rape and murder and mutilation and abduction. Either you support Bibi Netanyahu and his ludicrous right-wing agenda, or you're an anti-Semite. What are you talking about? I cry out against that government, that regime, as I did against the Trump regime here in the United States.
Preach, girl.
So what I'm saying to you is those voices are not the voices that are the dominant voices on our college campus. The dominant voices on the college campus are the extremes. They are not the voices that are calling for peace. And I've never seen an anti-war movement before that's not also a pro-peace movement. This one's not a pro-peace movement. We need to lift up and amplify and platform and resource the people who are actually fighting for peace and for justice. That just and loving society that we started talking about, that beloved community, it is not going to happen when we hold on to some fantasy vision that millions of people are somehow going to be pushed into the sea.
Yeah.
And both sides to have people who hold that vision. That's not happening. God forbid that should happen. What we need to do is figure out, what is this going to look like? And I honestly don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if it's two states living side by side, with each of them with sovereignty. I don't know if it's some kind of confederated state. I don't know what it looks like, but I know that the voices that we need to hear from right now are the Israelis and Palestinians who know and believe and have hope that there is a different kind of future. And then we echo their hope into this void of hopelessness that has penetrated every inch of the globe right now. But we have to have hope. And I can just say one last thing. I was talking to some peace builders, Israeli and Palestinian, a couple months ago now. And one of them said to me, do you think that if you said to a European in the 30s or in the 40s that one day someone would fly on a plane, get off in Paris, and then, spend 2 days and then take a train right into Berlin, and then take a train to Bruges, where they'd rent bicycles and ride around Bruges, and then they'd head to Vienna, and then they'd go back, to Portugal. Nobody could have imagined a Europe where there are basically open borders. And people millions of people died in Europe in 2 horrific world wars, and now they share currency. Right? Like it's extraordinary. And nobody thought it was possible until it became possible. And I think the same is true here. When we see each other's humanity, when we recognize that my win is not your loss, otherwise I'm not really winning. My liberation is tied up in your liberation and yours is in mine. Only when we see that and we lift up that vision can any of us have a future.
That's my sister right there, Bishop Vanessa.
Powerful. For those of you who are listening, this is Rabbi Sharon Brous.
Yes,
She has a
indeed.
book called The Amen Effect. I am going to encourage you to buy it. All right. There, you can buy it where bookstores, with at any bookstore you want to go to. But if you go down into the chat, you're going to see exactly where you can get it that she has recommended. Okay. Now, I don't want to end this conversation tonight without asking you one more question, because I think this is important. Your grandma Millie, is central to the book, in my guesstimation, just the way that I see things, especially her talking about showing up for celebration or simcha. Do you think she knew something that maybe the world has forgotten?
Yeah. I think thank you for bringing her name into this space. I think she understood that joy is not just a luxury, it is a spiritual necessity, that we need to experience joy even in the midst of the heartache. We need to experience joy. I mean, she lived to 97. So when you live that long, you have to experience some heartache, right? And she knew that life was full of heartache, but you grab those moments of joy. You just show up when the baby's born. You show up at the bat mitzvah, as she used to say, you go to the wedding if you can. We just have to grab those moments of joy when they come. And I'll just tell you, I have these spiritual practices at the end of the book, one for each chapter, one that sort of helps us realize the kind of the big vision of each chapter in very, very practical ways. And so I'll just tell you really quickly about my beloved friend Shifra, because Bishop Flunder and I know Shifra so well. So Shifra fell in love at a kind of later in life love with this wonderful man named Michael. And they had a beautiful love story, and they were supposed to be able to spend the rest of their lives together and die at an old age. But only a couple of years after they fell in love, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and he died only a few months after that. And Shifra called me when she was grieving, and she said, it just doesn't feel right for me to like sit in sackcloth and ashes and grieve him like a widow, with a black veil over my face. She said, because Michael was all about joy, and he was all about laughter, and he was the life of the party, and he loved having friends over for dinner, and he made everyone laugh. And she said, I need to grieve through joy. And so she literally set her clock for 18 minutes every single day during her whole year of mourning. And she forced herself to do something for 18 minutes that would give her joy and that would celebrate the fact that she was alive and that she had been granted the gift of this beautiful love. She would like eat the whole chocolate cake. You know what I mean? Like she would, listen to music in her apartment and just dance and call a friend that always made her giggle. And she did this every single day for a year. And when she told me about it, I said, I'm taking on this practice in solidarity too. Like, we have to allow ourselves to experience joy. And I think my grandma Millie understood that. I think she knew that life will conspire to bring you down. I mean, think about it. If you have one bit of bad news and 100 pieces of good news, you're focused on the bad news. You can't get it out of your mind. And so you have to lean into joy. Our bodies need it. Our spirits need it, and our communities need it. And I think our society needs that. And so that is really what I bless both of you with, that even as you're so deep in the holy work, the holy healing work and the truth-telling work, that you also are tender with yourselves and each other, and that you allow yourselves to experience real joy, because we need that.
Amen, Grandma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sharon, for taking your time out of your very busy schedule to be with us on tonight. Such powerful words, deep from the heart, things that I think that Bishop Flunder, that we needed to hear.
Yes.
And the people that listen, they need to hear. And I hope that those that are listening in, you all will share this conversation, because I think that people actually need to hear from someone like Rabbi Sharon about what's happening in the world and what we can do. and she's offered us so many things. And I pray that you would take them into our bosom. Bishop Flunder?
Just thank you, sister. And may your love and your time and your voice and your experience and your wisdom, may it empower us, all of us, in all the ways that we are needing to show up in the time in which we live. May peace be real and not petty. It's important. It's important that we do the work and that we get ourselves in this in real, honest, and clear ways. And when I say that peace will not be petty, that we're not going to be stuck on things that are useless, but we will be informed and we'll be engaged in the work of what it means to be a divine peacemaker. And that in the midst of it, we'll eat cake. I like it.
Oh, Lord.
Amen.
I love that.
All
All right.
have something about which to rejoice.
We
And
have
that
to
is
have
nice. Do
something.
it
I think
yourself
that's,
on a regular basis. It's not cake.
yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is
Something.
that will really bring joy. And it's important to balance it, you know. It's important to be in both of those interesting places at the same time, struggle and peace. And I bless God for you. Pray for your success as you go forward. Thank you for this book.
Yep. And I
Thank
bless
you.
God for your grandmother.
Oh,
Such a wise woman. And
Thank
that
you.
wisdom is still living on through you. So we appreciate you. I want to go to commercial. And so we're going to do an advertisement that Bishop Flunder is going to read too. I think we're going to do for our conference and then also for Beyond the Gatekeepers. And then we're going to give away the book.
God bless each of you. We are so glad that you joined us this evening for Beyond the Gatekeepers. And I want to encourage you to either begin or continue supporting Beyond the Gatekeepers. If you have been blessed, if you have received something that will shift and change, perhaps your thinking, your life, your intention, your ministry, support us. Support the broadcast by sending a donation. You can send it via Cash App to $TFAM Annual, TFAMANNUAL, or through PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. If you have not yet contributed, but you have been incredibly blessed by these times that we have met, please do what you can do to continue being a help and support to Beyond the Gatekeepers. God bless you. I also want to encourage you to join us August 5th through the 10th in Las Vegas, Nevada for the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries Leadership Conference. Many of you have been to our leadership conferences in the past. We want to encourage you. This one is incredibly important in the time that we are living in currently. There are many things that we're going to need to talk about, many ways in which we are need to or have a need to connect. We are inviting some of the best speakers, best promoters of peace, those that are prepared to do the work or who are doing the work. And we want to encourage you. We are using as a theme the theme that was a freedom theme in South Africa before South Africa experienced the freedom that it has now. Something inside so strong. We're believing together that there is something in us that we together need to release that will speak to the time in which we are in. We're encouraging you August 5th through the 10th, Las Vegas, Nevada. Join us. Join us. You can go online. You can go online to the TFAM pages and find out information as we go on or as we go forward. God bless you.
Thank you all so much. Hopefully you're putting down hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers already so that you can win the book. Remember, it's one word. If you leave the S off, it will not connect. So you have to make sure that you put Beyond the Gatekeepers so that you can win the opportunity to get this book, which I'm telling you is incredible. It's a wonderful read. It'll keep you captivated over and over again. You're not going to want to put this book down. So put down hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers to win this book. You can purchase the book if you don't win. And we're talking about a love train here. Let's really start a love train. We can do that online today by buying the book for someone else. You could gift this book to someone who may not be able to have it, somebody you want to send it to, some professor, some teacher, your parents, your children, somebody you want to have this book. It's going to be a blessing, I promise you. Hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. Okay, Pastor Sue, let's go. Our winner is Reverend Tracy Ruffin. Congratulations, Reverend Tracy Ruffin. You are the winner of the Amen Effect. And will you do me a favor? Please go to the Beyond the Gatekeepers page, go into our direct message, put your full name and address. We will get that to Rabbi Sharon's people, and they will make sure that you get a book. Congratulations to you. And again, you can still gift this book to someone. We want to thank you all. Thank you, Rabbi Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder.
Oh, my joy.
And thank you to all of our social media platforms that are on tonight. We say God bless you and have a wonderful evening.